Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 4 live stream for the Procore Championship. Gonna make sure you're ready for all of your exposure tomorrow. With first off, a look at the showdown side and how to attack your single round lineups. And then afterwards, we're gonna focus on the prop and the betting side, their underdog and prize picks, also some matchups on the sports books, all to tie it all together and hopefully end this week strong. But we got Rushing Yard in the chat, also Carrington Belton as well. And he says, let's close out this week with a Sunday showdown takedown. And amen to that. Cheers to everyone out there. Hopefully we can have a solid end to the weekend. Yeah, get ready for week 2 of the NFL season as well. I'm stoked for that. We've got that on the docket and this good finish with some really good names at the top end of the board. It's not every single fall series event that we're going to have world number 1 up there. Guys like even a Ben Griffin that would call a stud at this stage. So let's take advantage of it. So say hi in the chat as you guys get in here and feel free to hit me up with any questions that you have along the way. But to start this thing off, let's look at the golf course. So today it played a little bit, quote unquote, easier in the afternoon. But if you guys remember, the winds were higher in the afternoon. So when we take a look at the observed weather from this evening, you can see that it was closer to 15 miles an hour at times, 10 miles an hour plus for most of that afternoon. Whereas in the morning, it was closer to the single digits. So we would have expected conditions to favor that side. But with world number 1 on that side, also your informed players, that's always going to make a massive difference. So it was about a 0.6 shot difference towards that side, but it wasn't really conditions that were the reason for that. And when we take a look at this Friday forecast or Sunday forecast, geez, all out of whack to start this thing. But just like we had for the first 3 days, it's going to be higher winds in the afternoon. So it goes from closer to 3-4 miles an hour for the first 3 to 4 hours to closer to 9 to 12 miles an hour in the afternoon. So though conditions would be easier for the first half of play, it's probably going to be the same kind of dynamic where the first half plays to a harder scoring average because they're not playing as good of golf this week. And anytime you have such a top heavy field, I mean, most of your studs on the Ryder Cup team are already in that top 20. That's going to further add on top of that. So that's the weather. And we have to add on top of it that it is a Sunday showdown slate. We have play some points in play, unlike rounds 2 and 3. So even if there was a sizable edge towards some of those first half starters, it's not like we could fully stack them anyways. So the later guys, the players starting in that top 10, top 15 have to be priorities for your Sunday process. And that's not going to change based on this forecast. So don't sleep on the early guys, though. They will have slightly calmer conditions. And the best part is that they're coming in at low ownership as well. So when we go through the shots gained metrics, we try and find some of those diamonds in the rough. You want to have 1 to maybe 2 of those players sneaking into your lineups, but the other 3 or 4 spots should be mid to later starters that have chance for those placement points. Next thing we're going to go through would be ownership towards the top. So let me go ahead and share that with you guys. And we're going to go through the top 10 highest owned players because for Sunday Showdown, that ownership really starts to condense. And unlike rounds 2 and 3, there's a reason for that ownership condensing because a player like Ben Griffin or a Jackson Coyven or even a Scotty Scheffler starting at minus 14 is going to be banking in at least 4 or 5 placement points at the very least, is going to have a chance to get to that first place placement points, which is worth just a little bit under 3 birdies. So if somebody like Ben Griffin, for example, holds on to the lead, ends up winning this thing with, let's say, 4 birdies on the round, he's essentially getting 3 birdies added on top of that for where he's finishing on the day. So that's why these guys are getting so much extra love and why a Ben Griffin is 33% owned. So you're going to be eating that if you're using him starting at the very top. But you have to use a lot of these guys in your player pool. If you want to take down the big $5 or $25 GPPs, you're going to have players that have a chance to finish in the top 5. And you're going to have the winner as well. So towards the right over here, you guys can see the player pool tags. The top 4 categories were already there for rounds 2 and 3. Those are the ball striking poppers, short game regression candidates, high upside players, and course history. Also, though, we have this placement point tag towards the bottom, trying to take players that are starting towards the top. And while my player pool is blacked out here, I can tell you that of the players that are minus 14 or better, that I'm using 2 of the 3 in my lineup. So the only one I'm not using will be a Jackson Quaven for Sunday. I will be using a lot of Ben Griffin and Scotty Scheffler in my builds. They're proven commodities. They're the best players that we have in this field. And I would say that their floor tomorrow is probably a -1 to -2 rounds, top 3 placement points. And if they're posting 4 or 5 birdies, those placement points are going to take them to the optimal lineup. And the reason why, you can't play everyone at the top. So the reason why I'm singling out Quaven as my fade is he's a newer face to this, right? He's never been in contention on the PGA Tour before. He's a world-class talent. Somebody that I expect to be a top 5 player in probably a year or so. For right now, give me the guys that have proven it before. So that's what I'm doing with the top 3 players. It's also worth noting that some of your 7 and 8K players are also getting some steam. So for example, like Alanto Griffin at -10, he's almost 20% owned. And Emiliano Grillo in that mid tier is the chalkiest player in that range. You have a few other 9K guys sneaking in. So like your JJ Spawns of the world, McCarty at $8,600 is also getting some ownership. But a lot of chalk in that 7K range, like a Hughes and Eckroat, Garrick Higo, you can see is 17% owned as well. A lot that are just cut out of that top 10 that are in that 7K range because of Scotty Scheffler. And Scheffler is in the hunt, but he's still $13,600. So I've only got him at about 17% ownership. So if you want to use him for Sunday, there is room to go out there and get leverage. And in fact, I'm using him and a Ben Griffin in my lineups. And I already ran a dry run at this point. I'm able to get leverage on both of those players in my player pool. Now, I have closer to, I think, 50% Ben Griffin in that set of lineups that I was running, but it gave me a chance to mix in some Scotty Scheffler along with one other stud towards the top end of the 9K range. So you can use multiple of these players in your lineups, but you're going to have to pick a few to single out and not use as well. So I already told you about the Quaven side, but of these players that are in that 7K range, I believe I'm only using one of those players in my player pool. So, there are some spots where you're going to have to get different, take stands against what the rest of the field is going to be doing, but you're also going to need to get over the field on some of these guys as well. So just know that to get conviction, to get leverage on these sort of players, that you're going to have to use them a lot more than what you're used to. A $7,900 Hughes, you throw him in 15% of lineups for most showdown slates, and you're way over the field. And Eckroat, you throw him at 15% of lineups, and you're going to be 3-4x leverage for most of these kind of showdown slates. But because it's Sunday Showdown and they're starting at -10, you're going to have to use them in 30 to 40% of your lineups to get that 2x mark. So just reset your expectations, kind of have that in the back of your mind before you go out there and decide on any plays. Next, we'll talk through building a player pool, and that's where we're going to go through the shots gained metrics. So if there are any players that you guys want me to go through with any sort of a deep dive, feel free to let me know. But this is where we're going to focus on the ball striking poppers and our short game regression candidates. We want players that are hitting it sustainably, also perhaps players that weren't getting the most out of their short games. But don't forget about the high upside and the course history guys. We're not going to spend as much time on those categories. High upside, though, would be your best birdie or better percentage players that we have on the PGA Tour. Course history, of course, is just course history around Silverado Resort and Spa. And if you are a member of my Patreon page, that'll be really easy to research yourself. Over here on the event history tab, we have the last 5 years, the last 5 seasons at the Procore Championship. Named a few different things over those last 5 years, but nonetheless, we have all of it in there. And of course, all of the ownership projections. We only have the top 10 highest owned players here on the live stream, but if you're a part of my Patreon page, link down below to check out the Patreon. Golf DFS tier is how you get access to this. You can see the ownership for everyone, figure out who the lower owned guys are to go out there and try and get leverage on them. And also make sure that you're getting enough of these players towards the top that you're getting leverage in your large field lineups. But another thing to note is this PP tab at the bottom. That would be the placement point tab. We look at the stats for the first 3 rounds when we're looking at that. So that's not just the round 3 stuff like we have for these top 2 categories. This bottom category, my conviction plays that I'm using with a lot of the names that you see here, I'm only using them if they looked good for the entire event so far. Next up, let's go through the shots gained metrics. So like I said, any sort of questions you've got, now's the time for it if you guys want me to go through any player's profile. But we are going to go through round 3 in general. So we always start with the ball striking. That's the most sustainable part of golf. Number one, Scotty Scheffler, to no one's surprise, but a few other names that kind of stood out to me. Gary Woodland hit the ball well, but lost 2 strokes putting. Same thing with a Brandt Snedeker. I'll tell you for now that I am for sure playing at least one of those 2 players. And Austin Eckroat is at T5 in prime position for placement points, and he also really hit the ball well on Saturday. So somebody that I think is intriguing for your Sunday lineups. Garrick Higo, also nearly 3 strokes into the positive ball striking. A Ryo Hisatune and Michael Thorbjornsen over the 2 shots gained mark in that category. All these guys towards the very top here, in particular, the ones that didn't do a whole lot with their short game, are players that you're going to see in my player pool. And there are maybe an exception or 2 of those 5 or 6 guys towards the top that we've seen here. But if they're not highly owned, there's almost a 100% chance that I'm taking a dart throw on them. And for some of these higher owned players like a Scotty, an Eckroat, a Higo, etc., there's a good chance that I'm using those as my conviction plays as well, because if there's one part of golf that we can actually sustain from day to day, it is that golf swing. So for example, your Eckroat, who didn't get that much on and around the green, that's the kind of player that sets up extremely well with the stats, because if he can carry that, that is amazing. He was one of the best players in the ball striking today. And let's say that he can gain 2 strokes putting. Well, that's how you have one of the nutted rounds of the day and even of the tournament. I mean, that could be like a -7, a -8 round there. And if he does that at T5, that could even be contending for the win. And that might be a slight reach, especially if Ben Griffin or a Quaven shoots like -3, -4. But if they spin their wheels, he's going to be right there with that sort of a round. So I'm looking for my conviction plays, also some of my more diamond in the rough plays. Diamond in the rough options would be guys like a Gary Woodland, a Brandt Snedeker that are starting at T30, not really giving you that placement point potential, but do. They could get you maybe like top 10 placement point potential, not that top 5, but pretty damn close to it. Ryo Hisatune is another one that is also getting you that top 5 potential. He's a little bit closer at T12. Thorbjornsen's T17, so he's kind of on the fringe of that top 5 potential, but if he has a really nuclear round, something like -6, -7, I guess there's a chance that he could get there. But if we go down a little bit further is where we find some of our leverage plays, some of the guys that'll be sub 5, sub 7% owned in your large field contest. For example, like a Doug Gim, a Carl Phillips will be sub 5% owned in your GPPs. Not so much your McCartys, your Quavens, or your Henleys here. But Rosenmuller, oh boy, I mean, he just cannot putt, huh? He lost 5 strokes short game again, but hitting the ball well. So you can probably guess that I'm going back there. John Pock, too, he continues to hit the ball well, but cannot do anything with the short game stats. These sort of players are primed for positive regression. And in the case of these 2 right here, it's been back-to-back days where they've had that same kind of stat profile. So I'm not a quitter. I'm not just going to give up after they had just middling days today. And Sunday could be the spot for them to go off. And the ownership on those 2, the thing that's fantastic about it is it's going to be sub 5% on both of them. So if you're using some chalk, especially the more balanced lineup construction where you can hammer some of the higher end guys in the 8, 9K range, if you need to offset that, you're going to have to get real ugly with at least a player or 2. And those are going to be some of my prime candidates to do so. But players like a Luke List, also over a stroke gained ball striking and didn't do too much damage with the short game stats. All players that you might want to keep a bit of an eye on. And then when we go to the short game, it's a bit of the opposite. So these players that are heavily into the dark green, I don't really give too many craps about. It's hard to back that up in back-to-back days. So same thing around the green. We're really not even going to look at a lot of these players because it's just a fool's errand to try and gain 4 or 5 strokes short game in back-to-back days. But if we go to the players that lost a whole bunch of strokes, and we already pointed out Rosenmuller, a few other players that were losing short game as well before. But if we can just find guys that were neutral, like a Mac Meisner fits this kind of stat profile, or if he goes out there and he's even just a neutral with the putter the next day, that's something like a -3 round. And let alone the upside if he improves ball striking, or let alone goes out there and even gains out there on the greens. That's how a Mac Meisner could get there to the optimal lineup. And he's at T64, so he's got no placement point potential. But if you're using that more chalky lineup construction, it's a good way to be able to differentiate yourself. So those are a few players to consider from the short game regression candidate. If you want to go to the around the green as well, you can look at that. So a player like a Harris English, he was about a neutral in the 2 ball striking categories, but lost 1.5 strokes around the green. If he cleans that up, that is a market improvement from day to day. So that's what I'm looking for the round 3 stats. But as I previously hinted at, I also look at the full event stuff for the top 5, top 10. So when we're trying to figure out who to play and who to, get 40, 50% exposure to, I try and make sure that they're not all short game. And You don't really have anyone that is all short game towards the top end of the board. I guess a Garrett Higo, he almost gained 7 strokes putting. That's a bit of a red flag. Mackenzie Hughes, I guess, would be the most extreme example of this. Mackenzie Hughes has gained 10 strokes with the short game so far. Now, Mackenzie Hughes does have elite tier course history around this track, so I don't think you can completely eliminate him. But the players that really stand out as conviction plays because of the first 3 rounds, it would be like your Scotty Schefflers, right? He's gained 10 strokes ball striking. A JJ Spawn has gained 8 strokes ball striking. A Quaven over 8 strokes. And even a Ben Griffin who has gained the over 8 strokes, over 9 strokes actually, between the short game categories, he's also gained about 7 strokes ball striking. So unlike a player like Mackenzie Hughes, who's actually lost strokes ball striking for the week, it's not as much of a red flag there. So that's what I'm looking for with the top 5, top 10. And you can extend that to the top 10, top 20 as well, and use it as the icing on top of these round 3 stats to get to some of your plays. But like I said, for round 2 and 3 showdown, guys, you don't want the round 3 stats or even just the shots gained metrics alone to be only what you're using to build your player pool, because golf is such a variant sport. There's too much chaos involved with it. It's one of the more hard to predict sports that we have in this entire DFS space. So that's why we have the course history. That's why we have things like high upside players that we're using to get over the field on to make our player pool a little bit more well-rounded. And to show you guys the high upside players, it's been, I guess, probably about a week or an event or two since the last time we showed this. This is what I mean. So birdie or better percentage still highly correlates to your DraftKings score. Placement points are an added factor that we have here for Sunday, but still 65 to 75% of your points for tomorrow are going to be coming with your birdie or better production. So a guy like Scotty, who's number 1, obviously gets a bit of a boost there. That's kind of like a no crap scenario though, because he's almost in the lead at this stage. But a Justin Thomas could be a bit of a lower owned play. Keith Mitchell too, who I played Keith today and he sucked. So it's hard to want to go back, but he's number 5 on tour in birdie or better percentage. And we've seen crazier things happen before, right? Guys just randomly go off. And if he does at sub 7% ownership, that would be massive for the Sunday slate. So if I'm looking to take shots in the dark on players, and that's kind of what you're doing on this list, right? This isn't your conviction plays that you're using this kind of a stat for. It's more so the players that are lower owned. So for example, like a Keith Mitchell, that's going to be that sub 7%. And I guess let's find a few more examples, like a Bhatia isn't going to be that highly owned. A Taylor Montgomery who lost strokes putting today, that never happens for T Monty. He's number 13 in birdie or better percentage. Like he could be somebody that you use for a bounce back. Hayden Springer's in this field, and he's number 18 in birdie or better percentage. That's more so how I'm using that category to my advantage. So that's what I've got for the shots gained. I'll see if there's any player pool deep dives that we've got. If not, we're going to build a lineup together. So let's see where we left off and make sure we get any of those answered. So he said Jason Duffler just pipes 300-yard drives down the middle. Yeah, man, I was watching that today. It's a really firm golf course, so I don't think he was hitting it that far. He was hitting a 164 ball speed, which is about my ball speed on the golf course. And because he's so accurate and he was keeping it in those firm fairways, that's how he was hitting it 300 yards. So yeah, he looked like Superman. It's a little bit of the golf course that was helping him, and a slight elevation as well. That's, it's not massive elevation in Napa, but it's a little bit elevated because it's inland on California. Nothing like Palm Valley though. Thoughts on Bramlett. So let's go through the shots gained metrics for your sites. So back to this tab over here, and I don't really remember the shots gained profile, so I'm curious to see what this is going to look like. So for round 3, he gained in all 4 stat categories, so nothing really to nitpick there. In fact, we'd have to probably give him a 6.5, a 7 out of 10 on the stat profile. And if we extend it to the first 3 rounds, which I think is a better idea now that we have 3 full rounds to look at, he's gained a bunch on approach, over 5 strokes with his approach play so far. He's lost 2 strokes putting. In fact, I'm going to add him to my player pool is what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to post an update after we get off the live stream here, because I love those approach stats. And I didn't realize he'd be hitting it that good over the first few rounds. So let's go ahead and add him in as a ball striker. So he's $6,600. I've got him at about 3% ownership. So good call, man. And in fact, if he goes off tomorrow, I'll remember you sites. He said, watching your 65-inch OLED so you can make sure the episode's big screen. Yeah, I'll make sure it's big screen worthy for you, man. And yeah, a 65-inch TV, that's pretty beast mode, man. My TV is not that big, but I mostly use my computer anyways. Thoughts on Quade Cummins? Let's look at that. So he's kind of gone under the radar so far, but for the week has gained 5 strokes approach and lost a little bit with the putter. Let's go to round 3. Round 3 lost 2 strokes off the tee, but was otherwise really good. mean, it's pretty clear, right? He's just got to clean up that off the tee play and then sustain what he did elsewhere. He's not always the best putter. I mean, that's why he lost in round one. What did he lose? Like 2.8 strokes putting or something like that. If he's a neutral putting and then he cleans up the tee to green play, that's probably a -3 round. Now, him even being a neutral with the putter or cleaning up that off the tee play are two pretty big question marks. So he's a GPP option, I would say, especially with the T41. And he's the kind of player that you use to differentiate yourself, because let me actually double check the ownership that I've got on Cummins. I'm assuming it is sub 3%, but it might even be like sub 2% just because he was also a little bit more expensive than I thought he should be. It's $6,900, by the way. I don't know what the algorithm is doing on him. I respect the heck out of his game. He hits the ball a mile, but I don't necessarily get why he's around guys like a Seamus Power, some legit players like a David Skins, Eric Cole in terms of price tag. But yeah, I've got him at about 2% ownership. So yeah, he'd be live for a GPP flyer, I'd say. He said he birdied 18 to sell you on the over. For sure, man. I had him for that same exact bet, so I'm right there with you. It was one of his best days. You just kind of got to chalk it up to that at some point, right? Sometimes guys end up having their best stuff. He had missed 16 of his last 17 cuts, so I certainly did not expect him to shoot -1. That's for damn sure. But let's put a lineup here together. So we're going to show you the lineup construction for Sunday, which is a little bit different than rounds 2 and 3. We just have to make sure we have enough placement points to work with. So it depends on what contest you're entering. If you're in a cash lineup, you probably want at least 4 guys starting in the top 15. If you're in a GPP, it's probably 3 or 4 players that you're using starting towards the top. I see 3 or 4 because it depends on how chalky you're being. If you're using a 30%er than 2 25%ers, then you should probably cap it off at 3 of those guys that you're using. But if you're a little bit more realistic about the ownership that you're using, maybe it's like 1 25 to 30%er and then a couple 15 to 20%ers that you're using instead, you can get a core of those 4 guys towards the top that you feel comfortable with, and then find 2 pieces of differentiation to get different. So that's normally my blueprint. That's kind of just like the general strategy or template that I'm using for these Sunday Showdown slates. And then you adjust it according to the scoring average. And when it's a really easy golf course, maybe you take 1 less of the guys towards the top just because placement points don't matter as much. Harder golf course, you could even take 5 guys towards the top because, for example, if we take it to the biggest extreme, the US Open on Sunday, when it's got to play like +3.5 over par, you're going to really prioritize those placement points when most guys are only scoring like 20 to 25 raw points. Getting the 5 points for finishing in the top 20, getting the 7 to 8 points for finishing in the top 3 is worth more than a birdie. And the birdie average at a golf course like that might only be like 2.5 per round. And that's how tough the US Open can get on Sunday. This isn't the US Open though, right? We still are going to have guys that get there just by their birdie production, which is why we want 1 or 2 players to differentiate ourselves. So let's get our chalk in there. So I'm going to go with a Ben Griffin. We're going to go with the more balanced lineup construction here. What I mean by that is if you go with a Scotty Scheffler instead, then you're really going to have to worry about the salary down the line. And you have no chance at really using a Ben Griffin as a second man in, or at least realistically, right, at $6,500, it just handicaps you a little bit too much. So the balanced lineup construction would look a little bit more so like this. So we could throw in a Ben Griffin, we could throw in even a Henley, another 10K option. And you can see now we're down to $7,300, but we've got 2 guys with placement point potential and 2 studs already jammed into our lineup here. Let's throw in a Mackenzie Hughes in his course history. Let's also throw in maybe a Hisatune or a Springer at like $7,200. If we went with this as our core towards the top, we have the guy in first place. So we do have a piece of Mega Chalk in there, but we have a couple fringe top 15s in a Russell Henley and a Springer that are more realistically owned. A Mackenzie Hughes as well. That's closer to that 17, 18% ownership. That's why we can afford to take 4 of these chalky players. Now, if we had gone a little bit more chalky rather than going to these like guys at T9 or T12, if we had played like a Higo, for example, so let me show you what that would look like. If we had gone like Higo instead, and then maybe like a Griot as our chalk. If you went with, and let's actually take out Henley here. And who else? I guess there's not really an example of a guy up top you could use other than Koiven. Let's say you went with this sort of core, 4 guys starting in the top 5. This is going to be so much higher owned than that other combination. I mean, double to maybe even triple the usage in the large field GPPs, where you might not even have enough opportunity for leverage in these last 2 spots to differentiate yourself. Like you're going to be really highly chance to be duplicated. You're not going to have much of a chance to have a unique combination in there, which becomes a bit problematic. So that's why I wouldn't recommend taking like that exact set of 4 players. And those in particular 4 players I pointed out will be the chalkiest 4 that are used together. The Scotty Scheffler lineups will be a little bit lower owned, which is why we didn't include them in there. So let's go back to that lineup construction that we were using before. We had a Henley in there. Who else? Right, Mackenzie Hughes and Haynes Springer at $7,200. And now let's go ahead and mix in a few leverage plays towards the bottom. So in the 7K range, if we're trying to get a little bit different, like maybe a Castillo makes sense. He's been hitting the ball well over the last few rounds. And then here in the 6K range, we could leave salary on the table if we were worried about it. If we had that more chalky core 4 at the top, I probably would want to leave at least a couple $100 on the table. But for the sake of this lineup, if I wanted to round it off with a Bramlett at $6,600, we could afford to do so because we are a little bit more careful with our 8 and 9K players. So that's the idea of the lineup construction, is just balancing it across the board, giving and taking in spots to make sure that you're not overdoing it. And that was for the large shell GPP. So that would be the lineup construction for like the big $5 or $25 GPP, where you have a real legit chance at having the same lineup as somebody else. If you're in a single entry that's only got like 50 people, then forget it, right? Ownership duplication is really not that big a deal. If you're in a contest with just a couple hundred entries against it, like this one only has 35 entries, right? Like I'm not going to have to worry about duplicating pretty much whatsoever, unless I went with just the top 6 for my lineup, the top 6 guys at the top of the leaderboard. Any other sort of combination, you're okay in these sort of builds. It's just the bigger it is, the more that you have to worry about that game theory. So that's all I've got for the showdown side, guys. We're going to move on to the prop and the betting side here in a second. I think we're going to take like a 2-minute break. I'm going to go get a sip of water, maybe use the restroom, and then come back, because if yesterday was a sign they weren't posting these prop boards right away. So I want to give them, maybe a couple extra minutes to give us those props to go through. So let me refresh this, see if we have them posted yet. They do have something posted, so they don't have everything up quite yet, but they're getting around to it. I know Fanduel has their board up, so I'm assuming that they're going to get these up here in just a few. Let me go ahead, take that break. I'll be back probably in about 2 minutes, and then we're going to run with the prop and the betting side. And while I'm gone, guys, feel free to hit me up with any bets or anyone that you expect to play really well for Sunday. We'll go through the shots gain metrics, and we'll see what kind of value we can find on them. So I'm just typing a little banner. Let's see, be right back. 2-minute break. Just so that everyone knows, if anyone that's just joining us, I'll know where I am. And then when we get back, we're going to go through those. So I'll put the stat averages on the screen. By the way, even if we don't have a board when I get back here in 2 minutes, we're going to have the stuff to go through on the DP World Tour. So that's probably where we're going to start, because we already have those to go through, stat averages as well. So like I said, I will be right back. I do need to use the restroom, and then we'll go through some of that stuff here in a minute. All right, we are back. We're going crazy tonight, by the way. We got a Mexican Coke going wild on this Friday night over here. You said Underdog's got Euro first and not PGA's funny. Yeah, man. I mean, Underdog didn't post till the morning. And then you also had Prize Picks wait till like midnight. So I guess they just don't care about the volume, but you know, us sweaty tryhards are going to stay up for it. He said, you're going to be building golf and NFL lineups all night. He said, this is the best time of year for sure. It's a busy one for me. I got to admit, it's definitely a little bit more of a workload than I'm used to, but it's a lot of fun too. I mean, you literally have a sweat pretty much every single night. So I can't complain too much about it, but yeah, let me get a sip of this Mexican Coke that I just got out. And it tastes better, by the way. The Mexican product that they have for the Coke is literally 10 times better than the normal. So that's all you're going to see me drinking with that. But let's go through these stat averages. So we're just going to do the BMW PGA Championship stuff first. And this is the first round that they actually finished on time. So we have some DraftKings odds to go through and, of course, a full board comparatively. So the scoring average was minus 1.77. If you remember the lift, clean, and place talk, they did have that for round 3. And with a little bit of rain in the forecast for tomorrow, it's looking like it's going to be that once again. So birdie average was 4.45 per round. And we've got to realize that the guys that they have on the DraftKings board, and especially the Prize Picks board, which is even more selective than what you have on DraftKings, is all the elite tier players that don't even normally play on the DP World Tour, elite tier players on the PGA and the Live side. So their averages are much, much better than what you have with these. They played probably to a -3 scoring average, a birdie average of maybe even close to 5.5 per round, which is what I'm going to be using for round number 4 because the forecast looks almost the exact same. So let's go to Surrey, England, which is right about where the golf course is. It's throw down the flag here, and let's see what the hell we got for the weather. So it's going to be a little bit rainy again, which I think gives a pretty solid chance that we're going to get lift, clean, in place. And it's going to be windy as well, but the wind doesn't kick up until the afternoon. And what I noticed the first couple rounds is that it was windy for almost the entire day. So tomorrow morning, I think scoring conditions could be there for the taking, perhaps even the best conditions that they've had the entire week. So to go back to these averages, let me get to the right tab over here. I think the field average will probably be -1.5 to about -2, with the chance for the birdie average to go up as well. So perhaps in that 4.5 to 4.75 range, which would make the average for the guys that they have here in Prize Picks -3 or better, perhaps close to 5.5 birdies or better per round, which is just outrageous. So we're going to go through the board, see if we can find any value here. And hopefully by the time we're done, the sites like Prize Picks, Underdog, and their slapdick lines makers can give us some prop value to go through. But any sort of bets that you guys are eyeing, like I said before, feel free to let me know because I'm trying to find some exposure to enter here. So the first thing I want to go through would be these odds. And there were a few props I was already looking at. First of which being this Jon Rahm over on birdies. If I think the field average, at least for the guys that they have on the prop board, could get close to 5.25 to 5.5 per round, Jon Rahm would be an absolute no-brainer over. Not only was he a top 25 birdie maker pretty much every year that he played on the PGA Tour, but when he's gone to Live, he's been the #1 or #2 birdie maker on that tour for every single season he's been over there. So both seasons so far, I believe he's been either 1 or 2 in the final points ranking as well, literally the entire time he's been over there. And you can see here he's -135 towards the over. So when we go to Prize Picks, we go to the birdie or better tab. He is available at that sort of line. And I ideally want to mix it in with a PGA prop. So that's why I'm kind of annoyed that they don't have it up here yet. But we could try and find something here on the DP World Tour side as well. And because of the way that the payouts work on Prize Picks, if we anti-correlate it, we're only going to get a 3x payout. So I think I would rather try and go for the 2.75x and try and go for a little bit of correlation instead. So let's see what we can find for some line value. So I want to look at Patrick Reed's strokes line. I also kind of want to look at where they have Harry Hall posted as well, just to get an idea of some potential value. So let's start with Patrick Reed. P. Reed is at 69.5 and -135 under. So the same kind of odds that we were working with the birdie or better over. And then Harry Hall has the same kind of projection. So I kind of have a hard time parsing between those two players. Patrick Reed's been a top 5 player on the Live Tour for most of the year. Harry Hall has been a top 15 player on the PGA Tour for a lot of the year as well. Feels like Patrick Reed's probably the better player out of those two. But either one would be in play here. Both have been playing solid this week. That's why they have the late tee time, and they're in the last 5 or 6 groups that we have out on Sunday, these players at 69 are even in consideration. The only, I guess, problem with those guys at 69 is that they do have to shoot a -4 round to cover. But if the scoring average could even be close to -2, that's not as unreasonable as we'd think. In fact, gaining a stroke to the field for those players, the 69 would be gaining a stroke to about that 70 average, is well within their range of outcomes. So let me actually see what we have for the sportsbook lines. I already know that they're going to be either at 69.5 and juiced way under, or at 68.5 and juiced towards the over. But I'm just kind of curious to see on where they have a few of these. Like, let's look at Hideki, I guess. Hideki must not have had a very good round. He was in the lead heading into today, and now he's got the earlier tee time. So he's one of the 0.5 still, so I'm going to see that. He's -135 towards the under. And then some of the flat 69s. Let's look at Aubert. Let's look at Neiman. That's probably the best player that we have at that number. So Neiman is -160 over at 68.5. Wow, that's a lot of juice on that. My apologies, guys. And then who was the only one we want to look at? Aubert. Then let's look at Haddon as well. Aubert and Haddon. So Aubert -150 over, so slightly less juice. And then Terrell Haddon, who's been playing lights out golf, they actually have up at 69.5. So out of those props, the best quote unquote line value would be the Aubert prop. The one there is at a flat 69, but these 69.5s could be a little bit better. So let's throw in Hideki for now. Then let's try and look at some of the stats on these guys. So the problem with the DP World Tour is that they don't give us a lot of the live shots gained data. So we're not going to have as much to go through here. But what I am going to do is I'm just going to click on their profiles over here on the DP World Tour website, and we'll do it that way. So let me go ahead and share my screen so I can show you guys some of this information, and we'll try and figure out what the hell is going on here. So let's start with Hideki first. We'll use him as the first player that we'll break down. And let's look at his stats so far this week. So round 3, he did decent driving. He was about average, actually a little bit worse than field average in driving accuracy. Green and regulation percentage was 70th, though. I mean, he was horrendous at hitting green. So that was his main problem in round 3. First couple rounds, he was much better across the board. He actually putt really well in round 2. So that's actually a little bit of a red flag that he put so well on the second day. And then his first round stuff, he was number 6 in green and regulation percentage, and everything else was a little bit more flat. So I don't know. He's kind of got that negative momentum going. Round 2, red flag. Round 3 was that drastically terrible round. So let's take Hideki out of there. I don't like what we've seen there, especially over the last 36 holes. And then I guess Harry Hall and Patrick Reed. Let's see if we can do a little bit of a, this isn't the best analysis, but this is all we have for the DP World Tour as of right now. So we'll just make do with what we have. So round 3 for Hall, he putted well. That was essentially how he got to that kind of score. Round 2, it was a little bit more flat. That was his worst round of the week. And then in the first round, it was also a pretty decent putting day. So yeah, that also doesn't look that great, if I'm being honest. And let's go to Patrick Reed. He's in 6th place, so I would expect the stats to look a little bit better because of his positioning. But he putt well today. He also scrambled relatively well. Second round, it was solid driving and green regulation percentage. So I love that. And then the first round, he drove it decently, also was 25th in greens regulation. So yeah, of all the stat profiles that we've seen, Patrick Reed's probably the best. He didn't hit the ball the best today. If I was being nitpicky about it, 70th in driving accuracy, only hit 50% of his fairways. That's not the best. He also only hit 67% of his greens regulation. He was a lot better than that for rounds 1 and 2, but he's gone, -3, -4, -3 for the first few days. Needs to shoot -3 to cover that kind of line. I guess this would be the Live Golf double, right? We've got John Rahm from Live. We've got Patrick Reed from the 4 Aces over there, who are my favorite Live Golf team. Let's go ahead and nix those in for 2.75x. So -135 value in both directions, similar conditions expected. With the rain in this forecast, you would have to think that they're going to use Lift Clean in place just in case. And especially if there's a delay, like there could be more rain overnight and if they have to go back out there on Monday. So I just think that they're going to take the more prudent approach, and the scoring probably won't move that much. So I'll take those two together. So that'll be the slip that we take over on that side of things. And hopefully we've wasted enough time here. And I shouldn't say wasted time, right? We're going through important stuff. DP World Tour stuff is still a fun tour to bet and whatnot. But a lot of us are here for the PGA Tour side. And for whatever reason, Prize Picks and Underdog just have no urgency whatsoever to get these lines up. So let's go through the Fanduel board. So they do already have that posted. I was using that to kind of get an idea of conditions in general. And we've got conditions to go through and pin locations. So it's not like we're going to be wasting our time here over the next like 10 minutes or so. But hopefully they can get this damn board posted. They're being slapdicks, that's for sure. But first things first, let's get an idea for how the golf course played today. So scoring average is at the top. It was minus 0.94 under par, which is a little bit over 71 strokes. Birdie average didn't move that much at all. It was about 4 per round. It went up a little bit compared to round 2. Bogey average is where most of the movement was. It went down about 0.5 from round 2 to round 3. Fairway average went up ever so slightly as well. It went up about 0.1 from rounds 2 to round 3. And the green average also went up pretty drastically. It went up from about 12.1, 12.2 per round to 13 per round. So a lot of this was expected. You had the cut line. You got a lot of the players that were out of form towards the bottom out of there. And now with the guys that on the Ryder Cup team, your players that played the best golf over the first 36 holes, you saw that with the round 3 averages. And because pin locations haven't been able to go through those quite yet, but you'd assume that they might be slightly harder than what you usually have for moving day. I think the average is going to stay about the same, maybe get a little bit harder. But by a little bit harder, I mean like at worst 0.75 under par. In fact, it would not surprise me if they set it up even easier for Sunday. Like they're not always trying to completely battle these players on Sundays, like especially at these fall series events. It's not like it's a Sunday at the US Open or Sunday at the Masters where they're really trying to trick these players up. It's an event that's supposed to be a little bit more laid back. I mean, it's in Napa Valley, people enjoying the vineyards throughout the weekend. I don't think that they're going to make it too difficult on them. So if it still plays about -1 and these averages don't move much at all, that wouldn't surprise me. But if there is going to be any movement, I would say that the bogey average would be the one that I would really keep an eye on here, is because if they have a few tucked pins that are up on shelves, you know, the quote unquote hard pins that they save for the last round, that could go up to like 2.75 to maybe 2.85 per round. But I'm not really counting on that until we see the pin locations and we know exactly what that setup's going to look like. I'm going to keep it at about this 2.65 mark. Fairway average should stay in the 7 to 7.1 range, maybe to 7.15 if we want to be a little bit safer about it. And then this green and regulation percentage, I think that's going to stay about the same, maybe get a little bit worse, because they did have a few pin locations today that were towards the center of greens. If they move them towards the edges, it could go down ever so slightly to maybe like 12.75 per round. But in general, just like the averages for the bottom on the BMW PGA Championship, it should be pretty consistent from day to day. So that's what I would say about these averages. Let me go ahead and refresh Twitter to see if perhaps we have the pin locations, and it looks like we got them about 41 minutes ago. So yeah, let's get an idea for what this setup looks like, because at this point, we're still waiting on them to post some stuff. So we might as well get an exact idea for what we're dealing with. So let's go to hole 1. Let me catch up on chat, by the way, as well. See what's going on down there. Where are we at? You said, show us a little bit more chest hair. I could, but I don't know if everyone wants to see that, Byron, but what's going on, my dude? Everyone loves Byron in chat. Love to see it. Is Rahm my favorite? Yeah, of those two, that would be my favorite. The John Rahm one was pretty much a no-brainer for me to begin with, but I think the average for the players that are on the board could very well be about 5.5 per round tomorrow. So with earlier tee time as well, he's going off about midday. I think that helps him out. He said, stop wasting my time and show us more chest hair. Oh, you're cracking me up, my dude. And he said, do I like Fleetwood over 68 with the push equity? Not really, man. I wouldn't be fading a guy like Tommy Fleetwood. He's juiced towards the under on the sports books at 68.5. But I would say that it's not like insane to be taking that sort of a fade, because you just got to shoot -5 to go under it. I mean, at that kind of point, it's getting slightly outrageous, but he does have a 5.5 birdie line. I believe he's got a 1.5 bogey line, and he's juiced towards the under on those sports books. So I understand why he's projected there. That's for sure. He said, love Rahm. He's such a good dude. I don't know if good dude is what I would say about Rahm. He's a little bit fiery out there, but he's sure entertaining to watch on the golf course. That's for damn sure. Let's go through these pins. So first pin's on the middle right side. So it's pretty tucked near this bunker. I would say it's harder than today. Probably the hardest pin that you have at hole 1. What further complicates it a bit is also this downslope that you have just over this bunker. So unless you're in the fairway, you're not going to get close, because if you're hitting out of the rough, it's going to hit this little downslope and probably end up towards the backside over there. But if you are coming out of the fairway, you could conceivably spin it within 5 to 10 feet if you hit a perfect shot. Hole 2 is like front pin location, so this looks a bit easier, and it probably will be easier than what you had for today. Today, it was just a longer shot towards that very back corner, and they also tipped it out. So it's not like it was a pin location or a tee box that was moved up on a moving day, and that's going to play shorter on or longer on Sunday. It's a more accessible pin. You don't have really a bunker protecting it in front, and this collar could be a little bit problematic. So let's look at the sloping here. It is a pretty severe false front if you miss shorts, but you're going to have all that room behind the pin location to where, you would be silly if you're flirting with that front edge. Next up, we have 3, which is in the back left corner, 415 yards about right here. That's a slightly harder pin, I would say, but it's not a drastically hard one. Only reason that it's a little bit trickier is it's a slightly longer distance in, and it's a wedge shot. So players like having front pin locations for their wedge shots, just so that you have more room to spin it back if you're coming out of the fairway. But if you're coming out of the rough here on hole number 3, that's probably even advantageous to that back pin location. So I don't know, Justin Thomas and him just bombing away off the tee, he'll probably miss on this right side because he's been hitting massive slices all week. Justin Thomas used to be a player that we were counting on moving it in both directions. He showed so much control hitting the draw at times, that low bullet draw when he won the Masters. I was able to see that in action in person, which is absolutely beautiful. Every single drive this week, I've been tracking it because I've been fading his unders on fairways for a lot of it. He's hitting these massive high slices, and it's a little bit more consistent. It looks like he's keeping the ball slightly more on line, to my detriment today. He went over his fairway line today. But on this sort of hole, if he slices it to the right side, it's probably a good thing based on where that pin location is. So yeah, maybe if there's a birdie or better line for JT at hole 3, consider that. Really anyone that hits that massive slice, I think it's actually a good thing for those players. 4, we're over here towards the right side. It looks like an easier pin location. Actually, I wouldn't say that. It's probably about the same kind of pin location as what we had for today. I was going to say easier because it is at a low spot on this middle right corner, but it was also at a low spot today. In fact, there were guys like Duffner that hit it way up on this back shelf and then spun it back to like 3 feet. Again, to my detriment. So you can tell who I was swaying today based on some of this stuff that I'm saying here. Next up, we have 5, which is towards the middle left of the screen. This is a really tricky par 5, but it's short. If you hit it in the short stuff and you have an angle, it's going to be extremely attackable. But the problem is you had plenty of players today that were in the fairway at 5 and that had no chance at going for the green. So, for example, Sam Burns was about where my cursor is now, and he had to bail out over to the right side of this bunker. I guess he just couldn't hit the big draw to get it back towards that green. But this hole, even though it's only 525, not going to be nearly as high of a birdie or better percentage as you might expect. Next up, we have 6, which is in the very back left corner. This is a slightly harder pin, but you do have a little side slope that'll help players get closer to it. So I would say if you're a drawer of the golf ball, that's one that probably fits your eye a little bit more. 7 is going to be a middle right pin location. It looks easier than today, but I actually think it's harder. This is a hole, especially with a long iron shot in. It's probably going to be about 200 yards to that pin location where you can't stop it. You can't hit a ball and just have it stop within like 5 to 10 feet. You had people like Duffner today. Golly, you can tell that he was driving me crazy. At least you'll be able to tell by the end of this. He had a shot that hit this damn downslope just over this bunker. It was actually in the rough where it landed, and it ended up like 6 feet from the pin here in the back left corner. So like people that just hit it over this bunker on the right side are going to end up towards the very back of this green, and they're going to have like a 25 to 30 foot putt. So I actually think that pin location is harder than the one that you had for today. And yeah, the luck sack Duffner had on that hole really, really sent me. Next up, we have hole 8, which is on this front right corner over here. It is a easier pin than today for sure. It's on the low spot. It also has a little bit of a backstop aiding players as well. So that's one where I think the birdie percentage might go up a little bit. Next up, we have 9, which is in the back left corner. It's about where my cursor is now. That's a little bit of a tougher pin compared to today. Reason for that is it's on the high spot of the screen as opposed to the low spot. So anything that you miss to the right is going to work a little bit further away from that pin location. And that's the broad side of the green. So a lot of players are going to do that. Next up, we have 10, which is in the very back middle of this complex. It is an easier pin than today. And this also might look harder because it's a slightly longer shot in, but it's not as protected by this bunker. And because it's a firm golf course, another reason why some of the shorter players like Kuchar, Duffner have had a decent week. Covello, I mean, he made the cut. The guy's like 42 years old and number 500 in the world golf rankings. And he somehow made it to the weekend at this event. At this sort of pin location, you get an advantage because the ball is going to release. So it gives you a chance to, run it up to that pin location. And you can see today, a lot of players were just aiming left. And even if they hit it pin high, they were probably going to have 15 feet for a putt. Next up, we have 11, so a longer par 3. It's going to be in the very back middle, so no water in play here, but it is up on this back shelf, so it adds some difficulty in getting your distance correct. It's real easy to end up a little short and then roll back about 25 to 30 feet, or it's easy to go long and then have a really, really touchy chip to that back shelf. Next up, we've got 12, which is a middle right pin location. It's a par 5, a relatively long one, but if you get it up near the green complex, this pin location is probably the second easiest or third easiest at this hole. It's not the hardest, that's for sure, because you have enough room to hit a chip pretty much from all angles. Even if you're in this bunker, it's probably the hardest up and down that you can have, or second hardest. The hardest would be about where my cursor is now, probably a little bit further down, about right there. That would be the hardest up and down at that hole. But all these other angles, like short left, even if you miss it in the fairway short right over here, it's going to be a 90% up and down rate. I mean, I'd get it up and down almost every single time. Let's go to the next hole. Would be 13 on this back right corner. It's a short hole, but this is a really tough pin. You have the slope just in front of the pin that you'll draw shots back. And because it's a short hole, it's not like you're hitting a 170-yard shot in or like a 200-yard shot in where the ball's going to bounce out like we had on that par 3. You saw people spinning the ball back here. In fact, you can see with Ben Griffin today, his pitch point was the whole way back here, and it spun back to this number 2. So this pin location is going to be super duper hard. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and put it out here now. Anytime we have a pin location on a short par 4 like this, that is the hardest that you can possibly get on the hole, I always think to myself, are they going to move up the tee box? Because it's 362 here. Let me see where they had the tee box today. So they used it in the very back. It wouldn't be drivable if they moved it here. But if they moved it up to this tee box, or God forbid this one, they could make this a drivable par 4. Now, I don't think that they've ever done that here, at least that I remember. Maybe they have, and I just haven't conned it over the last couple of years. But I think that with this really tough pin location, if they were ever going to do that sort of thing, it would be when they have it there. Next up, we have 14, which is towards the very front middle of the screen. It's the second easiest pin that you have on this hole. The easiest pin is a little bit in front of where this 2 is. They had that for round 1 or 2. And this very front left corner, though, it's at a low spot, and it's, again, a wedge in. So even if your pitch point is about over here, you'll be able to spin it closer to where that hole location is. Next up, we have 15, which is in the front left, a par 5. I would say that this is the easiest pin that we have at this hole. Reason for that is you've got a relatively flat portion of the green over here, and it's at the low spot. So yeah, either the easiest or the second easiest pin that we have at 15. Next up, we have 16 in the very back right corner. That's about where my cursor is now. It's easier than today, but it's probably the second hardest pin that you have at that hole. Easiest one would be anything towards this front lobe, but back right's a little trickier, but not as tricky as this back left corner. Reason why this one was a little bit harder is the sloping that you can see where my cursor is now. It's, again, harder to get the distance control right when you're dealing with that kind of slope. Next up is 17, which was the long par 3 today. Water will be in play for tomorrow. So today it was on the very back left shelf. That was where the difficulty came from. We've seen that with a few other iron shots that they're going to be playing on Sunday. Now, though, you've got it towards this middle right side. You've got, a push perhaps getting closer towards that water, and there's a lot more sloping at that portion of the green. So scoring average, I would say, is going to stay about the same at 17. But if memory serves me correctly, this was the hardest hole in the golf course, or if not the hardest, close to it for round number 3. And then finally, 18 is a middle left pin. This is where Max Homa and Danny Willett, I think it was, had the craziness ensue on 18 here. It is the second hardest pin that you have at this hole. The hardest pin is in the very back left corner, which they used for round number 1. Wild that they had the hardest pin location for the first day. They did that on a lot of holes for round 1. I just really didn't get it. This middle left side, though, this swale, which we can't really get appreciation for when we have it in the green mode because it's just too dark. But now you can kind of see it. It's like a 5 to 6 yard drop off here on this left side. So if you miss it short left, or if you're in this bunker, it is going to be an extremely difficult shot to hit within 5 to 10 feet. But if you miss to the front right over here or over the back of the green, it's a relatively simple up and down. So this is all about positioning into 18. If you're hitting an iron shot in, do not miss to the left. If you happen to be a player watching this, Sepp Straka's caddy, I know, watches these from time to time. Unfortunately, not playing this week. But if you do miss to the left side of this green, you're shit out of luck, buddy. You're going to have a very hard time getting up and down. I mean, Homa, he hit that flub shot and then was able to get it in the next time. A lot of people, they end up flubbing it to their feet when they're in that situation, and then they hit it like 10 to 15 feet past the hole for their second shot, and then they end up missing it and making bogey at one of the easiest holes on the golf course. So if we're going through these pin locations, they look about where I was expecting them to be. There are a few easier pins, which is always going to be the case from round to round anyways, but there's not really any that were like overly hard. Like 6, maybe 7 are a little dicey, especially 7, that longer par 3. That's, I think, going to be probably the hardest hole. But you have enough slightly easier pin locations too that I think the scoring average is going to stay pretty much exactly the same. So probably about minus 0.9 to about a -1 scoring average. Birdie average about 4 per round, maybe as low as 3.9 is as low as I would push it. And yeah, these other categories too, I'm not expecting that much movement. Now, the only other aspect that we don't know about ahead of time that I want to throw out there is them moving up tee boxes. They could do that at 2 or 11. Those are long par 3s. They could do it at 7 as well, that especially with a pretty difficult pin location there. Maybe that 1 par 4, right? They make that drivable. We're not going to be able to tell that ahead of time, though. So that's the kind of a bummer. That's just something I hope the PGA Tour kind of improves at some point, is perhaps starting to give us those tee box locations, or just giving us a notice of when they're going to move one of those tee boxes so that we can use that in our analysis. Because especially on like the par 3 ones, where they can move a tee box not only just up, but laterally, like at Pebble Beach, they do that all the time. Farmers Insurance Open, hell, pretty much every golf course, right? There's different tee boxes where you can move slightly left to right. That completely changes that dynamic of the pin location. Like, I mean, what good is it knowing where the pin location is when you're coming in from like a 30-degree difference in terms of tee box? So if any of the PGA Tour staff or anyone that knows anyone at the PGA Tour staff ever gets a hold of this information, that's what we want to know. If you guys want to add on top of that kind of stuff. Okay, hopefully now we've given these slapdicks enough time to give us some props so that we can go through some stuff here together. So let me go ahead and refresh this. Fingers crossed that we've got stuff, and we don't. I guess I shouldn't have expected otherwise. So let's go through the Fanduel board instead. So they do have these posted, and I was already going through this before, so I kind of have an idea of what we're working with. Let's see where we left off on chat, though. Good dude. Yeah, I'm there with you, bro. I don't think he's a great dude. You said you guess you watched a little bit too much of him on YouTube. I mean, I'm sure he's a great guy off the golf course. Like if you're buddies with him, I'm sure like he's a splendid guy. But on the golf course, he does some questionable stuff. He said off the course, he's awesome. Yeah, I'm right there with you. He said you held off on Scotty at plus 500 per my suggestion. You got him at plus 1400 this morning. Yeah, timing's everything. And yeah, that like plus 500 just wasn't enough at that point. It was like the plus 650 that we were looking for. And hey, you ended up lucking out anyways and getting a better number. So good stuff. And you're in a really good spot now, man. You're 2 shots behind of 2 players that have been a little shaky on Sundays. I like your chances to at least have a sweat at it. He said, is Ben Griffin going to freebase C4 again? For your sake, I hope he does. Hits 2 shots OB and is like plus 6 through his first 3 or 4 holes or something. But probably not if he knows what's good for him. And I can't imagine dry scooping any sort of protein powder, anything on the first tee. The ability or the chance of you just like throwing up all of yourself. I used to dry scoop protein powder all the time when I was actually working out in college. But I mean, I always did it at home. I did it before I left or after I got home from my workout, so that in case my stomach ended up throwing up or something, I didn't look like a complete idiot. So crazy to me that he was doing that. He said it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert. He said, in the way that I navigate this Tourcast tells me how many hours I've spent on this site, for sure. And dude, that's the sweaty tryhard mindset. That's for sure. I wish that they had these damn tee boxes though, man. Maybe you can put in a word for me with Pat or somebody that has a little bit more influence than us, because those tee boxes would be the absolute nuts. That would just be so useful. He said it's odd that Underdog doesn't do the correlations for Euro. I think that's just a mistake. And wait, do they have like normal stuff up for Euro? The last few days, it hasn't been like strokes and whatnot, but let's see what they have there. Because if that's the case, then the one I'm going to post for the Patreon page is going to be over here on Underdog. So let's see. Let's throw in John Rahm and then read and see what it is. Good call, by the way, if that's the case. It's full 3x. Good call. And I guess I probably should have checked that before just in case, but they haven't been posting these for God knows how long. Take it for 3x instead of that 2.75x, guys. And if you ended up already entering it, then my apologies. That's on me for not double checking over here. But yeah, we'll max it out for the $25 that they'll let me, which is it's just criminal that they have it down. And look at this. Unfortunately, this exceeds your daily limit. Oh no, they limited me again. I didn't have a daily limit before this, and now I have a daily limit. All right, well, I guess that's why we entered it on Prize Picks, is because I can't even enter an Underdog if I wanted to. But for this board on FanDuel, just to give you guys an idea, it's priced very similar to what they had for round 3, and I don't think it's drastically off really in any direction. But let's go to Birdies right here. Let's bring up the Birdies or Better board. Who, by the way, in chat yesterday, somebody let me know that you could do this on FanDuel. I didn't know that before. So thank you to whoever that was. I forget whose name it was. But if we can get like a JJ Spawn at even money on these books, he's minus 140 towards his over on FanDuel. Like that's something that I'd consider doing. He's a top 50 birdie maker on tour this year. Morikawa's also minus 140 over, and he does have a decent iron setup and off the tee setup for this golf course. So I could see myself trying to eye that one up. They have some of your worst tier players, some of your lower tier guys like Kago at minus 140 under. So a lot of the field at that 4.5 mark just kind of depends on whether they're juiced over or under. So Quavin's minus 140 over. Same thing with a Ben Griffin. So I'd have to say that of these players that we've gone through on here, my favorite is probably a Quavin. I mean, Quavin's putter is hard to want to fade. He's somebody that even if he's putting himself in that 15 to 25 foot range, he's going to make 1 or 2 of those per round, let alone the par 5 birdie percentage that he's posting. But if we end up getting a JT at 4.5 birdies, I'm not expecting to. He's minus 150 over. So I said like Prize Picks will probably have him at 5 birdies. Underdog will probably have him with a multiplier towards the over. But if for some reason he's at that 4.5 flat, that's the best value that we have here. Same thing with a Scotty. He's at that 5.5 projection at minus 150 over. Those are some of the quote unquote plus EV lanes that you might want to keep an eye out for. And in terms of the board and whether I think like birdies or unders on strokes might be better to bet, I would probably side towards this birdie or better side just because of the double bogey equity. And it's not really something that we've talked about all that much, but the double bogey equity at this golf course is immense. First couple rounds, it was between 0.5 to 0.6 per round. Today, it was about 0.4 doubles or worse per round, which is much higher than most tour events. Most tour events is closer to about 0.15 to 0.2 per round. And that's normally before the cut line, where it's at 0.15 to 0.2. After the cut line at a tour event like this, it's usually like 0.1 doubles or worse per round. And it ramps up when we get to Florida. We play a course like the 3M Open that has all that water at it. But this golf course only has 2 holes with water at it. So it's kind of surprising to me that we get so many double bogeys or worse around here, but it's because of the tree-lined aspects. If you hit it under one of those trees and you end up on the roots like Scotty Scheffler did in round number 1, then making a bogey is even an accomplishment sometimes when you end up in that kind of scenario. So I would say that I like the over on birdies just a little bit more, because if you hit one bad tee shot, I mean, let's assume that you're Justin Thomas, right? And you've got that big high little slice going on literally all week, then if you end up under a set of tree roots and you make a double bogey, you've got to make 5 birdies just to shoot a 69 and cover that there, let alone your chance to go out there and make another bogey on top of it, which is why even with that minus 150 juice, I would rather take an over on this sort of 4.5 number because it's quote unquote safer. And Justin Thomas as well is super elite at making birdies. So to go to that, let's go to the stats tab, scoring. Let's go down to birdie or better percentage and then find Justin Thomas. I believe he's number 3. Yeah, number 3 on tour in the category. That's why I'd be targeting him in that sort of one. Now, you could take some fades, I think, as well. So I know we're talking about like maybe overs on birdies or unders on strokes. But going back to the stat averages from before, if it is a 2.5 bogey or worse average, if we can find a slapdick, maybe like one of the guys that's not one of the better players in the field, but is towards the top 25 because he's having a good week, maybe we fade him coming back down to earth on Sunday for an over on bogeys, because it is slightly over that mark to begin with. And Sunday pressure is a legit thing on the PGA Tour. So it's unfortunate that I don't have the board to go through and to like really show you guys this in actuality. Of course, I will be going through the board a little bit later on and still putting in all of my exposure. Just it will probably have to be off live stream. We are going to go through some matchups. So maybe by the time we go through the matchups, we'll have a full board to go through. But it's going to be a lot of positive stance plays, especially like overs on birdies for some of those elite tier guys. To go back to the list, I know Burns didn't have odds on here, but like a Sam Burns is somebody that I would take for an over on birdies at that 4.5 mark. And to go back to the birdie or better list, who else? Like Keith Mitchell, if they post him at 4 birdies, I would be super thrilled to take his over. That's about the field average. And you can see there, he's number 5 on tour in the category. For Bjornsson, if you got him at 4, maybe 4.5 with a multiplier towards the over, I could be considering that. And Akshay Bhatia, if they post him at 4 or 4.5, I could consider taking that for an over as well. And then, like I said, for the fades, I'll probably be fading the guys that are towards the top end of the leaderboard that have no business in being there. So just to kind of talk through who some of those guys could be, Garrett Kigo hasn't been playing the best golf, so that's a little bit questionable to me, I would say. Lanto Griffin's probably the most extreme example. I'll be actively looking to fade Lanto Griffin. Griffin has been, I hate to be brutal with these players, but he's been pretty horrendous for the last 6 months to a year. Hardly making cuts, and even when he does, it's not usually a top 25. So I'll be probably fading him in some capacity. Jonathan Bird, if we end up getting any sort of lines for him, we haven't seen him in this situation in multiple years. Justin Hastings, he was only recently just an amateur. So I hate to pick on the young guys, but maybe Hastings could be a little bit nervy out there on Sunday as well. And that's probably where I cut it off, because when you get into this like T17 to T25 range, like they're not going to be nearly as nervy as some of these guys starting in the top 12. And in particular, the guys that haven't been in this situation nearly as often. And I'm not sure if I mentioned the Mackenzie Hughes take before either. He's been so short game dependent. So I know we were talking about it with the DFS side before we went into the prop side a little bit after. But if you take a look at Mackenzie Hughes here, you can see he's gained, let's go through the entire golf tournament. He's gained over 10 strokes with the short game so far. So if you're going to pick on anyone that's a little bit more of an established tour player, it probably would be Mackenzie. So those are going to be the kind of guys that I'm looking to take for maybe an under on greens. If he's at like 12.5 greens, he's like number 132 on tour or something in the category. Let's see. Am I right about that? That would be pretty wild, right? If I get the exact number. And I'm such a sicko at these props that I wouldn't be that surprised if I'm exactly correct. Let's see. Cheers to that. My Mexican Coke over here. Number 132, Mackenzie Hughes in green regulation percentage. Oh, Lord. I need to get a life. That's what I see when I see that sort of thing. But like a Mackenzie Hughes would be somebody I could be taking for like an under on greens. Fairway average, to go back to that, it's about like 7.1 per round, maybe 7 per round. Maybe we can find somebody like a Justin Thomas and take him for an under on fairways at like 6.5. And beauty of that is if we take an over on birdies and then an under or on greens, under on fairways, for any sort of fade that we're mixing in, you're going to get a better payout. Whether it's 3x on Prize Picks, that's how they handle a fade and a positive stance play together. More ideally, if you enter it on the underdog side, you'll get a little bit over a 3x payout for taking a fade and a positive stance play together. So that's probably how I'll be attacking this kind of slate. So hopefully it gives you guys a little bit of an idea of what I'm thinking for my exposure. And I'm going to do one last refresh to see if we have these odds to go through. If not, just like I was doing from the day before, guys, on the PGA side, I'll probably post something on Twitter in terms of a piece of exposure. So if you guys aren't already following me over there on X/Twitter, that is Gsluke DFS, same as what I have here on YouTube. I posted a slip yesterday for our exposure. It went 1-1. We missed by the 0.5 hook. That was that Duffner prop that I was mentioning out there before. But we'll see if we can cash out on Sunday and get into the profit instead. But let's catch up on chat. Maybe after we go through these matchups, we'll end up getting a few props to go through, but I'm not counting on it. Let's put it that way. Let's see. So they do have the matchups posted at least. And yeah, we're going to use the regular 2-ball market for that, not the one with a tie. Where we leave off. You said, real talk, anyone that has done pre-workout knows that you would be on the throne by the 6th hole, for sure. And not only just that, my mind wouldn't be settled at all. And I took pre-workout, man, I had to be moving heavy things. I had to be listening to like Screamo or EDM music just to like kind of preoccupy my mind. It's a weird headspace. And it's not a headspace that I'll probably go back to at any point. Like when I do my workouts now, it's much more relaxed. And I'm not lifting as much, so I guess I don't need the pre-workout at this point. He said boards up on Underdog for PGA. Let's go. And yeah, we're eat, sleeping, and breathing golf. That's for sure. We're going to go through the matchups, and then we will go through that board on Underdog. But thanks for letting me know. And thank Lord that we can actually go through it this time, because I felt bad not being able to do it last time. So let's go through a few matchups, though. So I do want to get a piece of exposure in here. And I'm always looking for underdogs on these, but if we can find a couple favorites that I like, maybe we could do a little parlay and take them that way. I'm just not a big fan of taking these minus money ones, especially with the kind of juice that you're laying on these books. So let's see what we're cooking up. So far, I kind of agree with the odds on these matchups that I've seen so far. I like Mitchell on Sundays, but minus 150 odds is, it's just a slapdick bet, especially on somebody like a Killa Keith that's a little bit too volatile. Bo Hostler plus 145 versus JT. JT should be the favorite, but if you're betting a minus 200 without it being in a parlay, it's just absolutely wild, man. I wouldn't do that sort of thing. You got a Whaley versus Phillips. If you're laying 160 juice on Whaley, you're criminally insane. You've got Castillo versus Sahith Theegala. I mean, the reason why this is even money is because of the unknown with Sahith. Sahith is still returning from the injury, still trying to kind of iron things out after being away from the game for a couple months. So though he's historically the way better player than Castillo is, I actually think that being close to even money isn't the worst thing that I've seen. And I do want to go through some of these matchups with the Bet the Number matchup tool, which is the absolute nuts when going through these. In fact, were there any on here that I want to line shop? Let's look at the Eric Cole versus Meissner one. I want to see what that looks like. Let me drag this way over here so it's a little bit more accessible. Let's go Meissner versus Eric Cole. And we're going to go, last 24 rounds. It's a pretty decent sample size to look at, I'd say. And Meissner is nearly 1.9 or 1.8 shots. Actually, what am I saying? Yeah, nearly 1.8 shots better per round. So that's nearly a 2 shots gain difference. So when we look at the odds, and there we are in this tab over here, he's minus 125 versus a minus 110. I can't bet on DraftKings, so I'm going to have to see what they have on a Hard Rock Bet for odds. But because Eric Cole's minus 110, there's a chance that they post Meissner at minus 110 on the other side. And if I was getting just the normal juice that they lay on a lot of these matchups, I would bet Meissner between those two. Even at minus 125, with that massive discrepancy between them over the last 24 rounds, you could argue that it's still worth playing. And what I want to look at is just this event in general now. So we'll look at the last 3 rounds. So the better ball striker has been Meissner in both categories. He's about 1.3, almost 1.4 shots gained better per round off the tee. On approach, he's about a 0.2 shot difference compared to Eric Cole. In fact, let me see if they have the board posted. Hard Rock Bet's even more slapdick than Underdog and Prize Picks. They wait like until midnight or even 1 a.m. to post the board. So that's been keeping me up the last couple of days, is waiting for them to post the damn board for me to enter myself. But let's see what we have, or if we have anything posted, because minus 110 would be a dream on that sort of a matchup. But yeah, they don't have anything posted yet, so I don't even know why I got my hopes up there. But even at this minus 125, if you have access to DraftKings, I might throw like a half unit sprinkle on that kind of a combination. But let's keep going through these. If we did the Castillo versus Sahith Theegala one, I'm kind of curious what it looks like for this week. But over the last 24 rounds, it's not even close. It's not even a fair fight. So we probably don't even want to look at that. Let's put Theegala in there. Let's throw Castillo in on the other side. So for this event, similar as you'd expect, given that they're paired together, off the tee has favored Castillo, and Theegala has been striping the irons, but Castillo has also been hitting the irons well. So he is favored over the first 36 holes, or sorry, first 54 holes, I should say. The last 24 rounds, I guess I'll show you what I was hinting at. It's a massive difference. It is a 1.3 shot difference between these two players. So yeah, at even money, I don't know if I can bet against Theegala because of the long-term talent, but Castillo is probably the side I would bet if I had a gun pointed to my head and you said I had to pick one of the two. They're at minus 100 or minus 110. It's keep going further down this list. So Marty Party Laird versus a Trade Molnax. He should probably be slightly favored. So at minus 140, I'm not going to be a buyer at that sort of number. These minus 255s, these minus 400s versus these slapdick players, I'll never bet. In fact, I usually look at the underdog more than anything in these sort of matchups. And out of these ones that we've seen there, maybe a Steven Fisk or a Quade Cummins could be slightly intriguing. Now, let's look at Cummins versus Cantlay. We already know the form's going to be a massive discrepancy and is obviously going to favor Cantlay. But if you look at the stuff so far this week, that's where I'm a little bit more interested here, because I feel like Cantlay has hit the ball decently, but I know Quade Cummins has hit the ball decently. So if we go to the event so far, Cummins is 1.6 strokes better on approach, or actually 1.75 strokes better with the approach play so far. So though the form over the last 24 rounds obviously flavors Cantlay, you're getting him at nearly plus 200 odds. So I'm probably not going to enter that. I just have to see what I have on Hard Rock Bet. But the thing is with Hard Rock Bet and their odds that they're posting is sometimes they are very favorable compared to what we're getting on these other books. Like there's a chance he's at plus 200 or more. If I'm getting plus 200 on a head-to-head matchup, I might take the shot in the dark on a guy that's hitting his irons so well. Let's keep this going. Brandt Snedeker also hit his irons well, but he didn't do that well with the short game. So he could be somebody to consider to kind of throw off an Akshay Bhatia. But let's see how Akshay's been playing. I think he's also been pretty decent on approach, but let's confirm that. Akshay versus Sneds. Sneds, I already know how he's playing, but I do want to at least put him apples to apples against Akshay. So Akshay over his last 24 rounds is about 0.7 strokes better per round, but over the first 54 holes, he's the better ball striker too. So yeah, maybe we don't look to Snedeker as the underdog there just because it's a little bit more of just a round three thing for Snedeker and how he hit the ball. You have Luke List versus Shank. He's only minus 140. Okay, that's actually kind of interesting to me because List has been okay recently. And on the flip side of this, even though he's plus 105, I'm not looking at that number. I'm looking at this minus 140. Adam Shank's been pretty terrible. I actually tried betting against him today, and it didn't work out. But it was with Kevin Streelman. And Kevin Streelman's returning from injury, right? So if I was even remotely considering using him, it was because of a fade of Adam Shank more than anything. And so far this week, Luke List is 1.34 shots gained better per round on approach. If you go to the last 24 rounds, this is going to be the real kicker here. He's 1.3 shots gained better per round. So there's some decent juice here. Minus 140 isn't something that we can overlook. If on Hard Rock Bet, it's closer to minus 130 or maybe even slightly better odds than that, or even this minus 140, I'm going to consider adding it for a bet. So let's throw that into the shopping cart for now. I guess let's look at Woodland versus Bramlett. I don't think there's going to be a ton of value, but just in case, especially the last 24 rounds, that's what I want to see on these two. It's about a 1 shots gained difference towards Woodland as I was expecting. And he's minus 145 odds. If he was minus 130, I might be a taker on that kind of thing because it's over a shots gained difference between those two players. But almost minus 150 juice is just probably a little bit too much for me. Ben Coles is like the world's most slept on player. So I actually want to look at that one too. So it's Coles versus Power. Let's put in Seamus first, and let's throw in Coles as the second player. Ben Coles is somebody that I've bet multiple times for matchups so far this week. He's about 0.7 strokes better per round over his last 24 rounds. And if you go to the live stuff, he's a way better approach player. So of all the matchups that I've seen so far, this is probably my favorite. And he's so close to even money odds, plus 100 odds. And if he was plus 100, this is a full unit bet. So of these first three, this is definitely my favorite. But I'm going to be line shopping these because if the odds are slightly different on Hard Rock, then it's obviously going to adjust the math here a little bit. Let's keep rolling down this list, though. Thor versus Grayson Sig. Thor is really hitting the ball well, so I wouldn't want to fade him, even though it's a Sig at plus 130. You've got a Merritt versus a Davis Thompson. I don't love Davis Thompson. I don't know what it is about him. Maybe it's the punchable face, but Merritt's playing terribly, so this is probably going to be a no-go, but let's at least do our due diligence on it. He's a massive underdog, so we have to keep that in mind when we're looking at this. He's only about a stroke worse per round. Plus 200 is probably not enough. It's close to enough, though. Anything more than plus 200, and I would probably mix that one in as well. Let's see, Hisatune versus Bird. Yeah, I want to fade Bird in the prop markets, so I'm hoping that some of these pick'em sites maybe have something up for him. Got Henley versus Springer. Springer's plus 200. Yeah, I don't know if Henley's as fadeable as some of those other players that we're targeting at big plus money numbers. They've got Hughes versus Griffin. Yeah, it's a no-go. Hughes has just been too short game dependent for me to take him as a big minus money favorite. I do like McCarty, but I also do really like JJ Spawn tomorrow. He's been hitting the ball so well and consistently over the first 3 rounds that, yeah, I'm probably not going to take a stance against him. Let's look at Eckroat versus Grail. That is intriguing, especially at plus money like that. What are we doing? Oh, my computer is now shitting the bed. Okay, there we go. I need to get a new computer, by the way. That's on my list of things to do here over the next couple weeks. It's starting to get to that stage, and anyone that has a PC, especially one that they do a lot of work on, will know that after like 3-4 years, they really start to take a downturn. So I probably need to get that fixed here soon. Rio is 0.6 shots gained per round as opposed to slightly into the negative for Austin Eckroat. So that is why he's minus 135. So I was hoping that maybe Eckroat would be closer to him in the shots gained, but that just isn't the case. And then, yeah, the last group, Scotty versus Higo, or I guess that's not the last grouping out. Where the hell is Ben Griffin at, right? But yeah, these two, no go. Right? I'm not going to bet minus 500 on a Scotty Shuffler. So yeah, out of all of these, my favorites is Ben Coles. This minus 105, I would bet gladly right now. Anything better, and I'm going to be betting maybe 1.5 to even 2 units on that sort of a matchup. Second favorites, this Meissner versus Cole. It's pretty big discrepancy in their shots gained. And then third, and then maybe fourth here with the Troy Merritt. And yeah, if you're going to bet like this plus 200, right, it's like a half unit to a quarter unit sprinkle, right? You're not going too crazy on anything that's there at plus 200. But these bets, especially this Ben Coles one, is where you're getting closer to a 1 to maybe even a 2 unit bet there. But let's go to Underdog next. So thank you for telling me about the board dropping before. And maybe we even get something on Prize Picks here in a few minutes as well. Let's catch up on chat. What's going on, Antonio? Welcome on in. You're looking at Griffin versus Quaven. You said thoughts, please. And of course, Mahalo, welcome on in. So Griffin and Quaven, they didn't have that on my board. So it's crazy that they have them posted elsewhere. A Hard Rock Bet probably will have that one up later. The shots gained between the two is really hard to break down because Quaven has not played that often. So that's also probably why DraftKings doesn't have him up, because Quaven's so young and such a raw prospect. But over the last 24 rounds, they're close, but I don't know how seriously we can take that. So I don't know. I would go towards Griffin here, man. And it's not really the shots gained. It's not really what's happened this week that would push me that direction. If we look at the stuff this week, it's pretty much a toss-up anyways between these two players. It's experience. I went Ben Griffin because he's been in contention before. He's shown us an ability, at least has more experience and being in this kind of situation and trying to close something out, as opposed to Quaven, who is super young, super raw at this stage, could be a better player than Ben Griffin when it's all said and done. But right now, I want the old wily veteran. And it's crazy to call Ben Griffin a veteran at this point, but comparatively, he's certainly the one with a little bit more wisdom at this point. It's kind of a random name, but thoughts on Rio? He's playing good golf and can go off at any given time. I like the shots gained metrics on Rio. So let me go back to the tournament tab so that I can show you the shots gained metrics. In round 3 in particular, he did it in a very sustainable fashion. Somebody that I'll be over the field on for sure. So gained off the tee, gained on approach, over 2 strokes between those 2 categories. So yeah, at least for round 4 in particular, especially sitting there at T12, I think he's a really good showdown play. He will have some ownership, but I think it's substantiated given his chance for that placement point potential. But yeah, give me some Rio, man. I have him in lineups. He said that Reed Rombo combo with Hughes under on greens gives you 5.29x. Feels like decent value. I would say so. And it's kind of weird that they're including the correlation when it's on that 3-leg slip, but not when it was on 2 legs. He said Grillo looked solid today. He for sure did. In fact, he's in my player pool for Showdown because of that. He gained over 2 strokes on approach and was only a neutral with the short game category. So I think that's a pretty sharp take on that. He said the chest hair picks sell for a lot. Yeah, man, the laptop fund, right? We got to add to it somehow, right? We got to, I don't know if they have like a feet finder going for the chest hair picks, but we might have to sign up for something like that. What are my thoughts on amateurs not being able to keep their prize money? Yeah, it is bullshit. If they have the NIL out there, they should be able to let these guys get some money too, right? I know it's not the same exact process, different organizations, etc. But yeah, I think it's BS. I think you're 100% spot on about that. The fact that Dunlop couldn't get his money for winning, the fact that, Tyler Watts, who's in the field this week, isn't going to get a paycheck either. It's bullshit. And yeah, if you didn't know that, yeah, now you know, man. It's wild. Like literally Dunlop would have won like 1.2 $2 million or something like that. And he had to go back to class that next week. He did drop out rather quickly after, but imagine that you're sitting in class. You're like, wow, I could be a millionaire right now. And he was sitting on squats. But let's see what we got for these birdie lines. So I already told you there are a few players that I would take at even money. And you have Morikawa even money, who I don't really want to bet, because Morikawa is a bit of a loser, if we're being honest. You do have a Spawn at even money. That's maybe a little bit more playable. Cam Young, juice towards the over. Yeah, that was pretty much always going to be the case. English is at even money there. Same thing with an Akshay Bhatia. So I kind of want to see where DraftKings has these guys posted, especially Akshay, just because I'll probably be even money if I had to guess. But let's go ahead and just confirm that and take the doubt out of it. So he's minus 130 towards the over. So also has maybe some slight juice in that direction. Given the fact that he's top 15 on tour in the category, a decent putter on the surface as well as, believe it or not, Byron, your content put me onto that this week. So thank you for that on Akshay and how he was putting on the surface. But JT is the multiplier, right? We wanted that. Sam Burns too. We wanted to play that. He's got the multiplier towards the over. So by process of elimination, Akshay's on the table here. We could go to Russ Henley as well. I think he sets up pretty decently here. Spawn, right? He was one of the names that I was at least going to consider for this sort of a bet. And then I guess English. Well, English is the worst birdie maker out of all of those players. So he's probably the one that we won't use. Let's get to the right category. Let's get to birdie or better percentage. Is that what we're on here? Nope. Got to go to the right category. Scores, birdie or better percentage. And let's go through a few of these. So Akshay, just to show you guys that, is number 12, as I was telling you before. And let's go to Russ Henley and JJ Spawn. So these two players are going to rank a little bit lower in the category, but not too much. They're both pretty solid in the category. Number 35 for Russell Henley, and then JJ Spawn is number 54. So it would pretty much be in this order when it comes to their birdie or better ranking. Now, Henley's been the best out of these players this week, at least with the ball striking. Today, he lost a whole bunch of strokes putting. So I do like some short game regression for Russ Henley, but I'm also curious on how many birdies he made with that kind of a round. So he only had one birdie or better in round 3. Holy smokes. That was some real tough regression to lose almost 4 strokes to the field just in that one round alone. Round 2, he was solid with the putter. Round 1, he gained over 3 strokes. So that's really been the big difference. What do you do in round 2? Round 2, he had 6 birdies or better. Round 1, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 birdies or better on that round. And what are his odds? Probably minus 130. They've been pricing him at that almost the entire week. He's actually minus 135 towards the over, so slightly better value. And let's see where Spawn is too. So Spawn's right here, and he's also that minus 135. Throw Spawn in there. Let's also throw in Akshay. I just want to put their stats right next to each other to give us a little bit of an easier comparison. So over the first 54 holes, the best ball striker is Spawn. None of them other than Akshay. Look at that, the putting. I told you, Byron, you put me onto that this week. Look at that. He's gaining nearly 5 strokes putting. That's exactly what you want to see from an Akshay at this sort of golf course. You know what? I mean, he did fall off with the iron play today, but he still did manage to get to that 6 birdies or better mark. It does slightly worry me that he gained so much putting in that one single round. Almost feels like he's due a little bit to come back down to earth. So let's take Akshay out of there. I hate to do that to my guy, but he also had the worst odds out of the 3, right? He was only minus 130. A little bit sketchy with that shots gained putting, so we're going to take him out of their process of elimination. And that's whether we want to use a Henley or a Spawn, which is honestly tough to parse here. Now, if we're going to break the tie, I think the birdie or better percentage might be the better way to go about it. So I think we're going to use Russell Henley here. And Russell Henley is a bit of a dog. I don't worry about the Sunday pressure with a player like that. And on the flip side, I want to mix in a fade. So like I said, on a site like Underdog, if we take an over and an under, we can boost the payout to a little bit over 3x. And they had some really shitty guys at 4.5 birdies. So like we could even use that as a potential fade category. But let me see if they have fairways posted. So that's something that's always intriguing at a golf course that has such a low average. Like there's JT at that 6.5 mark. He did hit 7 of his 14 today, but that was, I don't know. I was watching his drives, and there were a couple that were very marginal and close to being missed fairways that it felt like we got a little bit screwed today on that kind of a lean. but who else is posted at the 6.5 mark? So I'm looking for guys that just spray it like all over the place. Don't keep the ball on planet Earth. I mean, that would be a Justin Thomas. Would fit that kind of a profile. But at 7.5, if we could find somebody that's a little sketchy with the driving accuracy as well, that could be in play. Where's Mackenzie Hughes at? So Hughes is at 6.5. I'm just wondering what his season-long ranking in the category is. I don't think I've looked at a driving accuracy number on Mackenzie Hughes ever. So let's go ahead and just double check on that. So he's number 121. He's down there also with the Justin Thomas of the world when it comes to that category. Let me bring up Data Golf. That's the next thing I want to bring up. Data Golf has driving accuracy gained. So not just raw driving accuracy percentages, but it gives us an idea of their percentage compared to the rest of the field. Let's see. So if we go to, this is Mackenzie Hughes, right? Yeah, just make sure I went to the right profile. He's lost accuracy in 4 of his last 5 events. He's lost accuracy in 7 of his last 9 events. He's lost the accuracy. He had a stretch earlier this year where he was hitting some fairways, and that's coincidentally when he played some of his best golf, but lately has not been doing so. So with that 6, it's about a 7 average at this sort of a golf course. If he loses accuracy to the field, that would be an under for us. And let me see what he's done so far. Now that it's been 3 rounds and we have a larger sample size after round 1, right? I would have been looking at these kind of a stats. But he hit 5 round 1, 7 round 2, and then 6 in round number 3. So his average so far is what, like 6 per round exactly? Yeah, 18 of his 42. It is a multiplier too. So you can see this, right? If we took this sort of a lean, we get a 3.33x payouts because of the multiplier. And I'm curious what like the odds are. I'm assuming he's juiced way over, right? Because that's why they would put that kind of a multiplier on him. He's only minus 145 towards the over, which I don't really agree with. You know what? We're going to make this the combination that we take. We're going to take the Russell Henley over, the Mackenzie Hughes under. I want to take those two together, but I forgot. I have a new limit from Underdog today, apparently, on the kind of exposure that I can enter. So I've got to wait 21 or 29 minutes. It's a daily limit. So I'm assuming at midnight that'll reset and I'll be able to enter some more stuff. I do have some NFL stuff in as well. I had, I think, 1 Underdog slip in on the day. So it's kind of crazy that, like, I don't know, like 4 slips, I guess, is the limit that I have here on Underdog now. But yeah, once that's overturned, I'll be entering this over there on my Patreon page as well. But I do want to look at a few of the other categories like greens of regulation, just for completion's sake on here, because the average did go up quite a bit. So I'm assuming the board's going to be priced higher, and it does look like that's the case. Yep, kind of where I expected these guys to be. I want to look at Rio's percentage, though. 13.5 is pretty high for anyone, especially... I hate to pick on my guy Rio, but Rio is not an elite tier player in this field. Not an elite tier period in really any field. And I do love my guy. He likes putting water in his mouth before he putts. He looks like a puffed up Kirby. He fills his mouth with water and then hits the putt, I guess, to help him with his concentration. But he does look silly. Like I said, he looks like the character Kirby from some of those games. He's number 42 in green and regulation percentage, though, which is way better than I thought it was going to be. So yeah, he's probably not the best fade there. So yeah, we're going to go with those two. Let me look at bogeys or worse. And I'm having massive deja vu right now. Jeez Louise. Because I feel like I've said this exact same thing before. But Cam Young's at 2.5. You have guys like Rio at 2.5. I was looking for kind of slapdick players to take for an over here. I mentioned before, right, to 2.6 average. If you gave me somebody that's going to be under pressure, under duress, not one of the best players in the field, I would have taken their over. But not so much with these guys, right? I mean, these are half decent players, especially a Cam Young. Emiliano Grillo, even, he's an average to an above average player in this field. So I don't know if he's really somebody I want to pick on. And I am curious where they have the odds on these kind of guys. So let's see. Let's go Cam Young first, and then we'll go Grillo. So Cam Young is juiced minus 125 under. And what's Grillo? Grillo is minus 135 towards the over. So yeah, it makes sense that Grillo would have the worst projection between those two. But if memory serves me correctly, Grillo's not that terrible of a bogey avoider. So just to double check that, let's throw in Grillo. He's number 53 on tour at avoiding bogeys. So yeah, it's probably not that fadeable, right? He's better than average. Slightly better than the average, probably has him at about 2.5. So I don't really figure how they have him juiced minus 135 towards the over at that sort of a number. So yeah, I'm going to stay away from that. So I do think that maybe the fairways could be the best category to take some fades for. Also, strokes could be in play for that. So when I was looking at the strokes board before, it felt like they had some of these guys juiced over. So like, for example, he's at 69 and he is minus 130 towards the over there. Did not mean to click that. My apologies. Let's navigate back to that tab. But a Patrick Cantlay, he's also minus 130 towards the over. You know, what's Morikawa? I know he's minus 145, but I want to see if he has a multiplier here. Let's type in Morikawa, or Moriflawa is my guy. DGen75 used to call him. You see there, 69.5, 0.86x towards the over. So unfortunately, does have that multiplier I was expecting. Yeah, I don't know. I see some potential value for us to enter. And they do have Lanto Griffin here at 71.5. That's not really somebody I'd be looking to fade at that kind of number. But if you gave me like a Jason Duffner again at 71.5, I would probably fade that given the same kind of conditions. I don't know. All right, let me see what you guys got in chat, and then we'll probably call it here soon. It's been an hour and a half live stream, one of the longest ones we've done for a while. Did I talk about Henley? Seeing him lose over 4 strokes putting is wild. Yeah, he's normally a much better putter than that, especially like the last year and a half. But 2.5 years ago, man, it was a commonplace for him. It was something that happened like once an event for Henley. He was one of the worst putters on tour back in like 2021. But yeah, lately, man, he's been a lot better at it. So I would expect him to turn it around sooner rather than later. And yeah, hopefully tomorrow for the bet that we took for him. He said, hopefully we can backdoor a top 10 somehow, total clunker in round 2. Yeah, man, it happens. Sometimes they don't have their fastball, but he's a strong finisher. We've seen him move up the boards in the last couple of rounds a few times, so wouldn't surprise me that much. You're saying Grillo is plus money for 3.5. Ooh, I would bet the over at 3.5 birdies if that's what you're talking about in a heartbeat if he was plus money. I think the average is going to be about 4 per round. I guess it's worth noting that he's not like an elite tier birdie maker or anything, but he's a good enough birdie maker where I think that's within reason. So let's go to scoring. Let's go to birdie or better percentage. Just type Grillo. He's number 87, so slightly better than average. Yeah, at plus money, man, I think that makes sense. And were you talking about underdog, by the way? Because if they do have him at that same line, it can make sense. So yeah, he's at 4.5. If he was at 3.5 and plus money, then I like that quite a bit. He said, am I doing a Ryder Cup stream? I will be. I'm not 100% sure on the timing, but there will be content for it. Probably a video on Monday going over the DFS side, and then Wednesday for the live stream. So something along those lines. He said, what about Merritt at 3.5? Let's look at it. So I'm assuming the odds are even money, but I do want to confirm that before I give you any take. So yeah, he's 3.5 even money on the sports books here. I should say the pick'em sites, not the sports books. On the sports books, though, he's minus 120 towards the over. So I don't know if I can get there, man. Here's the reason why. Merritt is way past his prime, right? We're dealing with a guy who's a shell of his former self at this point, just kind of getting up there in age. Doesn't even qualify for these stats. Let me see what he's done recently. So, yeah, I don't know if I can do it, man. He's just not playing well. The last play, let's go back to it. It was Mackenzie Hughes under on fairways was the one that we took. He said the Tom Kim downfall is sad to see. Hope that he gets the stuff sorted out. Me too, man. I mean, he used to be one of my favorite players on tour. He's kind of fallen out of that because of how he's playing. But in terms of character, in terms of just rooting for somebody that's a good dude, he's number 1 on that sort of a list. But that's all I've got, guys. It's getting late over here on the East Coast, but it was an absolute pleasure spending the last hour and a half with all of you. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, what the hell are you guys waiting for? But subscribe so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. We're going to have a Monday Night Football preview dropping for NFL for the slate coming on. Not tomorrow night, but the night after that, as well as for all the golf here during the fall swing. That'll be Ryder Cup. We'll have a few pieces of content out for that. Also, the other fall swing events. We've got like the Shriners, Sanderson Farms. It probably changed a few names of them, but like the Black Desert Championship. We'll have those over the next couple months, all covered here on the channel as well. But it will be a lot of football, then a little bit of golf sprinkled in. And until next time, guys, best of luck with everything that we're going with on Sunday. And you guys can find the rest of my content for Sunday on my Patreon page. That's where I have the projections that I was saying you guys before for DFS, as well as all the props that I'm taking on the sports books and all the pick'em sites. So we've already went through a few slips here that I'll be entering, but there'll be a lot more on top of that I'm taking as well. So if you want access to all of that, all the reasoning behind it, all the stat averages that I do for for golf, you can find that there. You may say, oh, there's no golf next week. Like, why would I sign up now? We do have DP World Tour stuff. So it's not like there's no weeks off when it comes to this golf stuff. We're pretty much entering golf props every single week from now until December. So if you've been thinking about joining, it is still a pretty decent time to do so. So check it out if you guys haven't already. Again, link down below to it. But I'll see you guys out there for the rest of the content next week.